Okay? Yes, no? Maybe so? All right. So is it time now? Time? Yeah, time. Okay. So this is a little unusual because I'm centering this around one book. Now, why would I do that? Because I was so impressed with this book that I wanted to try to impress you too. Because it's so very fundamental to our health and how our society runs and how whether people are happy or depressed or drug addicted or addicted to something. Okay. People tend to get addicted to something. And that something, just a preview, is something gives them pleasure and it gives them a shot of excitatory neurotransmitter. And we'll see that now. But the problem is that it excites the brain, and when it excites the brain wants to kind of mellow you out. So it becomes less and less sensitive to that excitatory neurotransmitter. So now you need more and more and more of that, and you get addicted to it. And then, well, we'll see. I better not tell you the whole story, but it also inhibits your happiness hormones. So the more you seek the pleasure to get the shot, the less happy you get. So let's go through it. So, processed foods. You'll see later that we should rename type 2 diabetes processed food disease. Okay? So what happens with processed foods? The food industry grosses 1.4 trillion, 47% profit on the average. Healthcare costs in the US are 3.5 trillion compared to 1.4. But 75% of these are chronic metabolic diseases in this cost, and 75% of those are preventable with better diet. Okay? So 1.9 trillion per year is wasted. And we lose 3 times in preventable healthcare costs what the food industry makes. See? And it explains why Medicare will be broke by 2026, and neither Obamacare or Trump care can fix it. So here's one thing that's really tough on us, is sugar consumption. And this is actually healthcare spending as percent of GDP, so that sort of normalizes out inflation and all those things. So basically, I didn't leave the curve on here for sugar consumption, but this is the healthcare costs going up and up. And the sugar industry was growing all over here. And why did it level out during World War II? There was sugar rationing. World War II, this way before you. But there was sugar rationing. People couldn't get sugar. And then high fructose corn syrup kicked in, and oh boy. And then everybody was telling you, don't eat fat. Probably since before you were born. So if you don't eat fat, what do you eat? People eat more carbs and sugar. And the thing is that fat is satiating. Fat, when you eat fat, it makes you feel satisfied. You don't need more. But when you eat sugar, after a short time, you need more. So you get satiated. I mean, you get satiated with fat, but not with sugar. Okay, life expectancy versus how much we're spending on healthcare. Now, this isn't up to the absolute latest, but it's pretty recent. And look at all these other countries. They get a much better bang for their buck. This is health expenditures down here. And here's their life expectancy. Here's a couple of high ones up there: Spain, Japan, Switzerland. Spain doesn't spend so much. Japan spends a little more. Switzerland spends more, but they're doing a lot better. Look at us down here. We're life expectancy is just way below, and compared to what we spend on healthcare, it's terrible. And this is correlated with high fructose corn syrup. Now, that's not the only thing, but this is when high fructose corn syrup started, right? Right in there. Okay? So different time axes here, but anyway, that's that. Now, how about the sugar industry? The sugar industry, there was warnings in the 50s that coronary heart disease risk was driven by sugar, sucrose. But this guy went and looked at the Sugar Research Foundation internal documents, historical reports and statements relevant to the early debates about the dietary causes of coronary heart disease, and assembled findings chronologically into a case study. And they sponsored its first coronary heart disease research project in 1965, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the most prominent medical journal in the country. And it said fat and cholesterol is the cause of heart disease and downplayed sugar. So they screwed the whole country, basically, and they paid off mostly actually Harvard professors to do this, right? And the Harvard professors did not disclose where they got the money to write this damn thing, okay? So that was the start, and there were other people that piled on about don't eat fat, and if you don't eat fat, what do you eat? Sugar and carbohydrates, okay? So let's go on. So this is just a simulation, but it's pretty interesting. The health and economic benefit of reducing sugar intake in the US. And so there's two curves here. One of them is for a 20% reduction in sugar, just by boosting taxes. And here's a 50%, the red one is 50% reduction in sugar if the USDA would somehow jump in. And you'd have to read the paper to figure it out. It's published in 2017, and if you look on the web, you'll see this. So type 2 diabetes, if we cut 20% sugar, intake of sugar, it would go down quite a bit. If we cut 50%, look at that line, man, wow. Heart disease, down. Fatty liver disease, we look at the rest of it, let's go. So life expectancy decline in the US. I can't remember who OECD is. It must be some aggregate of, of the more prosperous countries. So their life expectancy keeps tweaking up. Ours goes up and then flatten out. And actually, I should have found the last few years, it's actually going down now. And then overdose deaths from heroin and non-methadone synthetics like fentanyl, bad stuff. So if people are depressed and unhappy because they're not getting enough of that pleasure stimulus, they tend to turn to drugs or alcohol, or maybe both. But if they do that, they tend to take more and more and more because they get addicted. And look at the men are dying off like crazy, and the women are too. This is overdose deaths, okay? And it continues to go up. I didn't have time. I got rather short notice from Dave that he wanted me to give this talk, and I didn't have time to look up the latest statistics, but it keeps going. Okay, alcohol use disorder, increasing here. And look at the percent change. Women, look at this. Women, total, up 50%. This is something classified by the DSM. This is the Psychiatrist Manual, okay? It's the latest Psychiatrist Manual, DSM-4, and they classify alcohol use disorder. Up 50% in that 12 years. Women, even more than men, they're really pulling it up, 83. And then look at it as a function of age. Greater than 65, the women are up 106%. Alcohol use disorder. So Granny is really tanking it down, right? But everybody is up. But this is Granny is really doing it. And so, wow. Okay. Antidepressant use in the US, increasing greatly. Female, way up. Male, not so much. They tend to do maybe the drugs and alcohol more. I don't know. But anyway, it's way up. And it keeps going up. Right now, the latest numbers I've seen are 25% of the women in the US are on some kind of antidepressant medication. Bad news. Suicides in children, 10 to 14. Can you imagine that? They're going up. And what's more, here's motor vehicle traffic injury, okay? That's bad too. It's going down because more and more seatbelt use and car seat use, a lot of pressure on people to put their kids, not only in the car seat, but the right car seat. So if they smack their car or somebody smacks them, the kids are okay, pretty much. But suicide by these kids is now above motor vehicle traffic injury. Isn't that something? Bad news, okay? I'm exhausted from trying to be stronger than I feel. And that's pursuit of happiness. That's what we're talking about here ultimately. Everybody would like to be happy, I think. And so here's the big hack. And it's the confusion of pleasure with happiness. If you seek more pleasure and you get more pleasure, you're going to be happier. And that's the hack. That's the fundamental hack, okay? And we get pushed on this. Well, let's look at pleasure and happiness. So pleasure is short-lived. Happiness tends to be longer-lived. Pleasure is visceral. You'll feel it in your gut. And happiness is ethereal. It's just kind of all around you. You can't really place it. But, that's pleasure often comes from taking. Happiness often comes from giving. Pleasure tends to be experienced alone, and happiness is often experienced with others. You can get pleasure from substances, but you can't get happy with substances. You just can't. And extremes of pleasure lead to addiction, and you can't be addicted to happiness. At least that's what the psychologists say. So this is the bottom line here. So pleasure, I told you right in the beginning that pleasure is driven by this excitatory transmitter in the brain, and it's called dopamine. Dopamine, okay? We're going to hit that a little harder. Whereas happiness is driven by serotonin. And we can talk a little bit, I didn't put this in, but I probably should have, is serotonin requires a certain particular essential amino acids. Did somebody talk about essential amino acids in this class? Maybe not, Dave, huh? There's 20 different amino acids in our diet. And the one that's absolutely required for serotonin is something called tryptophan. And it's the lowest amount of any amino acid in our diet. One of Dave's students is trying to develop a yeast that expresses tryptophan, so you could put that yeast in bread and things like that, and you could get high tryptophan bread. But you need that to make serotonin. And then also, you need plenty of vitamin D for your brain to be able to make serotonin. So there's a lot of things going on here, but that's the big deal. Dopamine is the pleasure one that tends to lead to addiction, and happiness hormone is something called serotonin. So dopamine, this explains the background. Dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter, and long-term chronic firing of dopamine receptors can even kill neurons. It's called excitotoxicity. And to protect the brain's trying to protect itself and protect you, the neurons become less sensitive to the dopamine. That's called down-regulating the dopamine receptors. So the cells have dopamine receptors on their surface, and when there's too much dopamine, they pull in those dopamine receptors so the brain isn't so overexcited, and you can keep in a more, less highly excited. But when you have fewer receptors, the receptors go down, and the next time you need a bigger hit of whatever it is for pleasure to get the same rush, and you get tolerance. Then you need a bigger hit, and then a bigger hit, and a bigger hit. And when the neurons start to die, that's addiction, when they just can't take it anymore. So this is really, really important. And this is part of the hacking of the American mind. So this is a fun one. The MRI shows your brain has been hijacked by dopamine pirates. You are now under the full control of social media, corporations, gambling, casinos, and big pharma. Are you writing me a prescription? No, I'm buying stock in those companies. Okay, dopamine receptors are much lower in addiction. So this is a brain scan that lights up the dopamine receptors. So I won't tell you how this is done, but so we've got controls on the left here, and then here's a cocaine addicted person. Dopamine receptors have been knocked way down. Meth addicted person, dopamine receptors way down. Alcohol addicted person, dopamine receptors way down. Heroin, look at that one. Boy, it almost squelches the dopamine receptors completely. Okay, so the drug abusers have less of these dopamine receptors because the brain is trying to protect itself from being overexcited. Facebook addiction. You know anybody who's addicted to Facebook? So there's a Facebook addiction. This is a Psychological Report paper in 2014. And what they did here, they have an addiction score in a bunch of different people, and then they were able to scan the dopamine receptors with the right technology in the brain, and they found a pretty darn good correlation that the more addicted people were, the fewer, well, I mean, it doesn't show it this way, but this is the signal change. In other words, it was a decrease, but it's a signal change in this dopamine receptor region. So Facebook addiction. So what do we know about that? Oops, what did I do here? Okay, I said this already. Well, why I put this in again? Anyway, so this is the explanation that I just gave you before. So there's more too. That stress also is a very negative thing for your serotonin receptors. So that means the serotonin receptors are down. That increases depression. Okay, metabolic syndrome, which is similar to type 2 diabetes. It's kind of a precursor for type 2 diabetes. It's tied into processed food heavily. That knocks down your serotonin. So that's more depression. And so the addiction tends to get you into stress responses, which knocks down your serotonin receptor. So you get less happy. So confusion of pleasure and happiness. Industry-driven, government-sanctioned, willful, well-orchestrated. It's a plot, not a conspiracy. So these companies don't talk to each other. Everybody knows it. And it's engineered with a profit motive. So it's confusing pleasure with happiness. So open happiness. This is the Coke ad. Longest running ad campaign ever done. I think it ran for 35 years that Coke published this. Open happiness. Open a Coke and you'll get happy. You'll get your shot of fructose or fructose corn syrup or whatever it is. Okay? Here, the road to your happy place is paved with raisins and flakes. Okay? You get hit with this all the time. What do we got? Large amount of sugar. Okay? Little fat, large amount of sugar, lots of carbs, not much protein. Okay? So lots of sugar. And then, if you go for the crunch, then look at the ingredients here. This one was 16 grams of sugar per serving. This one is 29 grams of sugar per serving. What do we got in here? We got sugar, got raisins which have sugar in them. We've got brown sugar syrup. We've got corn syrup. And to top it off, we got a little honey. So 29 grams of sugar per serving. And almost no fat and lots and lots of carbs. Okay. So, but your road to happy is paved with raisins and flakes. Sleep deprivation. Anybody know anybody who's had sleep deprivation or has sleep deprivation? That tends to make you stressed. Technology. Turns out, we'll see in a moment here, the technology, a lot of it is designed to boost your dopamine. So you get addicted to the technology. Remember the slide on the Facebook addiction. Okay? Aha, this is the guy who built Facebook. And this is an interview of him. And he told how Facebook exploited a vulnerability in human psychology. We need to give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or post or whatever. Yeah. I mean, this really works. People seek that dopamine hit. It's not a very big one, but they get it. I mean, I could just tell you a quick story. I think I've got a minute for this. So my son lives in Maui. It's very expensive to go there, but occasionally we get there, usually over Christmas and New Year's. And we had a lot of the family there. I think it was 3 years ago. And we're sitting in comfortable chairs, listening to the surf, looking at the sunset. The kids have been swimming. Everybody was mellowed out pretty much, except one teenage girl who was running her Facebook. She wasn't experiencing either the people or the other younger kids or the wonderful surf or the sunset. She was looking for likes on her Facebook page. She was addicted to Facebook and closed off everything else around her that was absolutely spectacular, on the beach in Maui. Wow. Her Facebook addiction overwhelmed that. And they built it in. They built it in on purpose. And companies, if you have an app and you want to soup it up so more people use it and use it and use it, there are companies that'll fix your app to make it more dopamine stimulating. So you can just hire them up and they'll fix your app. They'll juice up your app to make it more addictive, right? Aha. PET brain scanning of internet gaming disorder. Do you know anybody that plays a lot of internet games, computer games? Yeah, it knocks down it stimulates knocks down your dopamine receptors. That's what it does. What do we got here? Any score, duration of addiction. Yeah. Internet gaming disorder. Now, a lot of experiments are done on animals because, you have to pay people to come and be on experiments, and some of these experiments are pretty brutal. So this is a class of experiments where rats can get drugs in water if they push the little pedal. They push the pedal and they'll self-administrate drugs. And they're comparing now the response to the same drug in the same type of animal, or they give them a shot of the drug, but they can't get more. They just get a little shot of the drug, right? And animals will prefer certain drugs to almost any activity, including eating and drinking. And they can self-stimulate to exhaustion and even death in some settings, depending on how it's set up. So they'll keep hitting the pedal to get the rush. Okay. So what can you do personally? Well, first of all, read the book. And I don't know if I'll have time to go to the 4 C's, but it's in the book and it's really good. And this will up your serotonin, reduce your dopamine, lower your cortisol, and it really works for you and your friends and your family. Diabetes should be renamed processed food disease. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but that would be good to do that. Roll back the subsidies for processed food. Right now, processed food is corn, wheat, soy, sugar. All these are subsidized. I believe they're still subsidized. And so maybe the farmers need a little subsidy, but I wouldn't subsidize sugar at all. And I'm not sure about these others, but that's another issue. Remove sugar from the FDA generally recognized as safe list. That's the GRAS list. So if you have something that you'd like to feed to people, pretty much have to have it on the GRAS list. Did David Camelina ever make it on the GRAS list? I think it finally did. You remember? Camelina, did Camelina finally make it to the GRAS list? Camelina? You don't know? Okay, he doesn't know. Okay, so that's a super good grain that Dave has been working on improving and developing by selection. And it's got the high omega-3, low omega-6 of flax. But remember when I was talking about the omega-3, omega-6, flax is good, but it's a hard little seed, and you have to grind it up in order to get any food value out of it, either for animals or for people. But once you grind the flax, it goes rancid very fast. And so you have to pretty much grind it fresh every day. Whereas Camelina is got just as good fatty acids, but it's jumping with vitamin E. So vitamin E protects against rancidity. So you can grind the Camelina and it'll keep for weeks or months, depending on how it's stored. And you can feed that to animals or people, and it's great stuff. So summary, reward is not contentment, and pleasure is not happiness. Reward is dopamine, contentment and happiness is serotonin. And this is really important here, this number 3. Excess reward, excess dopamine, interferes with serotonin. So the more you pursue pleasure, the less happy you get. It's built into your brain. People don't know this because their whole system has been hacked. And chronic stress drives reward at the expense of contentment. So government and business has intentionally conflated pleasure with happiness, specifically to get you to buy its junk or engage in hedonic behaviors that are profitable. And individuals in society have become fat, sick, stupid, broke, addicted, depressed, and most unhappy. So, wow. So it's a fundamental hack, mixing up pleasure. If you get pleasure, you'll be happy. You know, people get pleasure from all kinds of things: driving fast cars, mountain biking, dangerous situations, shopping. Some people have a shopping addiction. Not too many students because they don't have a lot of money, but people do have. And there's all kinds of addictions. Whatever jacks them up, they're seeking happiness, but they're not getting it. They're getting less happiness. Okay? If you boost your omega-3 and reduce your omega-6, you're better off too. So here's the book. Let's see. Okay. Can I use about 3 more minutes, or would you rather I didn't? 3 minutes? Okay. So here's the 4 C's. Connect with other people. Talk to them person to person rather than texting them. Okay? If you're sitting across a table or somewhere near a person and you're actually interacting with them, your brain has mirror neurons that really get it sink in with the emotional state of that person. Whereas if you're through electronics, you don't get that. So first C is connect. Oh, here it is. I already explained that. Okay. Empathy is required for serotonin generation and less anxiety and interaction. So I won't go through this since I only have 3 minutes. Social media generates dopamine. Facebook use leads to social isolation, depression. And this is that book. Social media means we're alone together. Contribute. Padding your bank account is not contributing. Lottery winners are not happy. So those who value financial success derive less contentment. Saving rather than spending increases happiness. You can derive happiness from your work if you see your work as helping others, and your boss can see it too. So altruism, volunteerism, philanthropy, anything that contributes to the greater good, all generate serotonin. Cope. What's cope? Take care of yourself. Sleep deprivation increases fear, cortisol output, inhibits prefrontal cortex function. Many adults get too little sleep. Many have clinical insomnia. Caffeine reduces sleep, increases your dopamine. I've got to watch that one. So trick, if you put lots and lots of cream in your coffee, it moderates that caffeine response. More fat. Multitasking and smoke and mirrors. Only 2.5% of the population can really do multitasking. I used to thought I was a multitasking jock, but it's just not true. It drives up cortisol. So coping. Screens are the antithesis of sleep. Blue light from screens activates the midbrain. And we could go on and on here. I don't want to take too much more time. But smartphone apps for wellness don't yet sure benefit. That's a complicated one. Exercise is good as antidepressants and alleviating depression. This is a great one. Cook. That's the 4th C. Okay. That way, if you cook, a lot of people in college don't cook because you don't have a place to cook or you don't have time to cook. But in terms of thinking of big picture, in terms of lifestyle, first of all, if you cook, you know the ingredients that go in your food. Okay, that's a good thing. And processed food is low in tryptophan, which is you need for making serotonin. Even if you're not seeking too much pleasure, you can't make enough serotonin if you don't have enough tryptophan, and it's low in processed food. Processed food is very low in omega-3 fatty acids, which is anti-inflammatory, stabilizes your brain, increases contentment. High sugar in processed food increases addiction, metabolic syndrome. Low fiber in processed food, and fiber is good in many ways. And 1/3 of Americans don't know how to cook. They're hostages to the processed food industry for life. Okay? I guess I don't have time to tell another story. Let me just go on to the last thing here. Okay, so that's good enough. We'll just stop there. Now I did another little hit of caffeine here, but it's got half and half in there. So I've got $5.
Sounds like gloom and doom to me. But I think you should be telling us now what kind of research we should do to alleviate this problem. I mean, you can spread angst all you want, but let's
What
get
kind of
on to
research?
this.
Okay, you want to do that, or let's do the question first?
I'll go over there while you answer that.
Okay, so one of the big things you saw is that we need more omega-3 and less omega-6. And there's many, many ways you can get at that. I think I showed you when I was talking about this, how kids do much better in school if they have enough omega-3, and they have better behavior, and they have better attention. Well, that's a project you can work on. Work with kids if you're interested in that, and try to get them to have better food. And work with people like Dave who are trying to improve the nutritional content of foods. Now, go ahead, let's do a question and I'll get back to that.
Is there a way for the receptors to be regrown or reversed in the brain?
Can you regenerate your receptors once you've fried them? Eventually, yes, you can. It takes a while, but the brain will come back. It takes a while. And I don't actually know the time frame, but that would be interesting to look into. It'd be very interesting to look into the time frame for that. How could you regrow the part of your brain that you need? Huh? That would be a great research project too, wouldn't it? Okay.
So my first question is, can you improve?
A little louder. Can you get that mic a little closer in?
When are you going to have that flaxseed come out? Like when can we expect the better nutritional food to come out?
That's one for Dave. Dave, can you answer that? Camelina. When is this super food?
Okay, here's the real problem. When I breed a better wheat that has high lysine, for instance, guess what the insects do? They eat it to the ground. Our plant breeders are in real trouble because every time they see insects on a plant, they throw it away. So we are constantly breeding for lower and lower nutrition, and we publish a paper on this or two. And it's starting to get traction now. People are starting to see that plant breeders constantly going for yield are going for starch, sugar, things like that.
Bigger grain seeds have more starch in them, right? And so that's what agriculture has been doing for a long, long time, is breed for better nutrition and better yield, and that tends to knock down the nutrition.
But wait, there's a group called the Celiac Society of America, and they're no more than 1% of the population. But they got together and they met with every congressman in Congress, and they passed a law saying you have to label what's in food. Now, the labels aren't very good yet. They just say protein. They don't say how good the protein is.
Quality of protein, yeah.
But we're getting there. People are starting to read labels. That is a big start, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to understand the labels. Maybe some kind of guide to label reading or something. I don't know. Maybe a blog on label reading. I don't really know. I mean, we need some creative input here.
So we're obviously all connecting very virtually right now. How does
Yeah.
that form of connection influence our serotonin levels?
It's not good for us. You know, people are less happy during this separated time. Okay. And there's all kinds of data. I don't have it in my mind about people, you know, more suicide during this COVID thing, more depression, more child abuse, all kinds of things you read about. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So what can we do about that? Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. Maybe we can think about ways that we could connect better one-on-one. Like we just had a wonderful conversation with my son in Maui, right? We had a half-hour conversation, my wife and I, each on a different phone, and it was really good. It was really good. I mean, we focused on it and was on the phone at least, and at least we heard him and he responded and all that kind of thing. So I think that must help a bit.
Here we go.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for someone who, like, if there's an individual who eats a lot of processed foods and sugars, healthy foods wouldn't like taste good to them because it's like such a big difference. So is there a way to like help that transition, like going to vegetables and, you know, brown rice and stuff like that instead of processed foods and all these high sugar things?
Yeah, well, that's really a tough one. That's an interesting one. One of the things that I advocate is simply right away getting on these little purified omega-3 capsules that have the most brain active part of the fish oil. I mentioned, I don't know if you were here when I was talking about the omega-3, omega-6, but people sort of know that fish oil has got healthy stuff. They can't afford to eat enough fish, or they get fish sticks that are cooked in coconut oil. They're fish sticks that are cooked in soy oil or corn oil, which ruins the 6-3 balance. But and so they say, well, I'm going to go to Costco and buy some fish oil, and I'm going to get healthy. The problem is that fish oil isn't very tasty. It gives them fish burps and so forth, and so they don't tend to keep taking it. But companies purify the brain active part of that fish oil. They purify away any mercury or PCBs, and it's a small pill and not very expensive. So that is an antidote to a bad diet. That's a good step. It'll start to make you happier, and then you can think more about
We have another question.
Okay, good.
So other than diet supplements, what ways do we have to address nutritional deficiencies and food deserts?
Food deserts? We found on this elementary school in Indian Reservation, which is a classic food desert, these kids just took off in their school performance and their attitude and their behavior with these little pills I was just talking about. So that's a good stop.
I have a question.
You have a question? No, we don't take questions from you. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, go
It
ahead.
seems to me, I read somewhere that when you exercise, you become addicted to endorphins that are produced in your body. And maybe we fight addiction with addiction the way you
Substituting.
fight fire with fire. Is that right?
Substituting. Yeah, I think that works probably. It probably works.
Okay, how many of you guys exercise 3 times a week?
Quite a few. Quite a few. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a confession. I used to be a gym rat, and I would go to the gym, 3 or 4 times a week and really hit it, But about 8 years ago, I got so damn bored with it that I just couldn't do it anymore. I have so many other things I'm doing that I haven't been to the gym in 8 years. But a little bit ago, I got into something called bulletproof coffee, very high in fat, brain octane. And man, I lost 20 pounds in the last 6 months, slowly. And now I feel so much better energy and such. I'm thinking about going back to the gym. I haven't actually done it yet, but I'm thinking about going back to the gym. What time of day will I do it? Which gym will it be? That's a step in the right direction. So go ahead. Sorry.
This class might be an experiment in the hacking of the American mind. The first day, we had 150 people in here. Now we have 16, 18 people. What's going on with the other ones? The ones who are not getting any kind of personal interaction, questions, and so on. It's really scary. And I think universities have to learn how to handle mental problems as well. Yes.
He doesn't have a question. He was saying no,
Oh.
he doesn't have a question. He was scratching his head, and he didn't have a question.
So
So,
it's a giant experiment. Okay, we have the huge food industry, and they make money by sales. And they have learned how to manipulate the American mind a bit. But we can fight back. We can try to figure out how to make better food. And that's what my lab does all the time, is try to make healthier, better food. And maybe we fail, and maybe not. But I would suggest that you really look at that as a possible profession.
I could just say that Dave Sands is one of my few scientific heroes, because he's out there trying to improve the nutritional quality of food and fight against this whole thing of yield. No, let's do nutrition instead. And there's not very many people like that, but he's a real leader and a very creative one.
Well, thank you.
Well, you deserve it. Okay, so what do we got? We got another few minutes.
Yeah, one thing is, Ed and I were talking. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, here. I don't have my, yeah.
We were talking about that very simple exam that I gave you guys. Just help us choose what we should emphasize in this course. Okay, and we gave you 7 possibilities, and you were to choose 2. Now, Ed gets in a fervor about that, and he says, well, why don't we, in a week or 2, suggest that you write a paragraph on one of your 2 choices, and he will grade it.
Why did you choose it? Why did you choose it? And why do you find it interesting and important? Right.
And
Put some real thought in it, not just check the multiple choice box.
And the point is, he will grade it, but they won't go to your final grade. He will just help you prepare for the final essay, which we will definitely grade. So it will just be a way that he can feed back on you.
Yeah, just give you a little feedback on whatever you're writing. And so I think it's good for you to, get a little more concrete than just check off the boxes. One of the things I can't stand about this distance learning is the exams have to be kind of stupid, right? Multiple choice. And it's hard to do anything very much more complicated than that. And so I wanted an in-person class this semester. I have a couple of minutes, right? You keep asking questions. I'm just babbling here. I wanted an in-person class this semester, and there weren't very many. Like, this is different ways you can do it, and it's Dave's show. So the only thing I could get for in-person was what are called recitation sections of a big class the lectures are totally online. It's 180 students. So I have 6 sections of 30 students each. I have to meet every week. And that's fine. I mean, I can interact with them and try to answer their questions. And I review the lectures that have been given the previous week, and then I give them a quiz. And man, some of these kids just get felled like a poleaxe with a quiz where they have to actually write down some answers. I mean, they get online tests where they just, check multiple choice. And that doesn't really engage you very much. So some kids are doing fine, of course. But I think it's a hard thing with with this online learning. It makes it harder and harder.
What I wouldn't mind doing, but it's probably illegal, is to check everybody's dopamine levels and serotonin levels and just start getting data on what happens when you use one of these and when you don't, and when you exercise and all that. This is wide open to experimentation because he knows how to measure that stuff. So there we are. We're trying to develop hypotheses. We're hoping that you develop one concept in this course that you really ought to go for. And that will be the final exam. Thank you.
Okay, so that's great. I think that's a really good idea, is to, write a paper on your thing you found most interesting in this class. And yeah, I think that this is a great class, and I'll be happy to spend a little time. I'll try to give each of you at least a sentence response. There's 250 kids, is it?
I better tell you that we don't know exactly when we're going to ask you to write this, but it'll probably be in a couple weeks as preparation for your final exam. And we'll organize it with Duncan as to how to do that.
Good, okay. So let's see. Golly, there were so many good questions. I don't know which question to award $5. You got a question there? Or should I? I think we have to go. Okay, so I can do that. Well, I actually, there were so many good questions. I don't remember what your question was, but I remember I liked it. What was your question? Oh yeah, neuron regrowth. That's a good one. That is a good one. That's all it takes. Wow, you can, and so you can't get discouraged in the beginning because it takes 3 to 6 weeks. Wow, okay. You can regrow your brain in 3 to 6 weeks. Wow, isn't that something? So let's see, how do I shut this off so it don't ruin the battery for the next guys? Thank you for the questions.